All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Pep Talks Uncut. We're a 30-minute show about the LGBTQ plus community in Pennsylvania, and the show is completely unscripted and unedited. We play the raw footage, and whatever happens in the next 30 minutes is what ends up being shown on Facebook and YouTube, which will be published on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Today's special guest is Angela Giampolo of the Giampolo Law firm in Philadelphia, and it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's so nice to be here. And I always love when an interview starts with, is there anything off limits? You know you're in for some fun.
I would certainly hope so. So I don't know if this first question is going to be fun or not, but you have got quite an astounding resume. I mean, Temple University, you worked for the United Nations on Rwandan genocide.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
How did that go? What was involved there?
Yeah, so I am, and probably a lot of people don't know this, I'm French Canadian originally. So, well, actually born in the US, so American, but my mom is from Quebec. So we moved back there. I don't remember being born here. Basically, I was so young. And so even though I'm very Italian looking and Angela Giampolo and all the things, like I identify culturally much more as French Canadian, and I don't like pasta and all of the things that my Italian wife's family, they call me a mock Italian, that I'm not really Italian, I'm a mock Italian. So the head of the peacekeeping mission for that was going on in Belgium and in Rwanda, but for Belgium and for the United Nations, the head of the peacekeeping mission was French Canadian, General Dallaire. And so we, in 1996, we remember 94, we remember the genocide. It was on our TV, the way Black Hawk Down was for Americans. And I've seen Madeleine Albright speak 3 times since then. And as a dignitary, especially as a Secretary of State, you never apologize for anything that you did. I have chills. You never apologize for anything that you did during your term, because International Criminal Court, if you apologize, that's an admission of fault. And then if you end up in a country, they could technically arrest you for what you apologized for when you were, a dignitary. But every single time I've spoken, whenever she's asked, is there anything that you regret? And she says she feels as though she let the Rwandan genocide occur because Black Hawk Down had happened. Bill Clinton and her had said, we can't lose any more Americans on African soil, 8 Americans. And so they stood back when the whole world knew what was happening. And ultimately, the range is from anywhere from 1 million to 4 million people in 100 days. So there's, when you look at genocides and Holocausts and whatnot, you don't compare. You don't say one is worse than the other, but 1 to 4 million in 100 days versus 4 million during the Holocaust over, years. It just speaks to the bloodshed that occurred during that 100 days. And they had no gas chambers, they had no guns. So this was all hand-to-hand combat, 1 million people, 100 days. So to come full circle, French Canadian, I was 14, 94, I was 14. I just remember seeing it. And I told myself if I ever did go to law school, because ever since the age of 12, the detention lady told me I should go to law school. And that was in my head. And I was like, if I ever did, I want to work there. And so I had the opportunity.
So that means you have quite the background then in international law, which would include immigration rights?
No, so I always thought that I was going to be an international human rights attorney. Mm-hmm. And so at Temple, I was published in the Law Review and focused predominantly on human trafficking. That was a passion of mine that, I truly believe if poverty were not a systemic issue in the world, that women wouldn't be treated as a commodity. But since there is poverty and you can make money off of women, and women are basically a never-ending commodity, not never-ending, but trees are becoming scarce, all of the different things that people can smuggle, they will smuggle humans if they can, ultimately. And so I really came at human trafficking from that perspective, which took me to Beijing, or before Tanzania. So before the War Crimes Tribunal, and Temple's amazing. Temple had a program that allowed me to get a certificate in Chinese law while living and working there, still in law school. But I mean, living in Beijing and working in Beijing while technically being matriculated at Temple Law was just amazing. And so, yeah, so I did that. And then while I was in Beijing, I got the acceptance letter from the United Nations. I had applied like 2 years prior, never heard, crickets, tumbleweed.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I'm actually kind of close to them over in Beijing, you know, closest than I've ever been.
Right.
And they're like, you know, you start in the fall. And, or maybe it was like, you start in the fall. And this was winter there. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like I'm in China. And so Dean, now Provost Epps, but at the time, Dean Epps of the law school, I emailed her and the head of student services. And I told them what offer I got. And Dean Epps replied, I mean, in a minute, you're crazy if you don't do it. We'll help you figure it out.
Mhm.
So from there, I moved to Tanzania and then did that. And then I realized through all of that, through human trafficking and now genocide, and my work during the day at the tribunal was watching video and reading transcripts to determine whether or not the crime was genocide, crimes against humanity, which is underneath that, and then torture, which is underneath that. Now, when that's your job all day, like, isn't it all bad? Like, do we really have to go through the elements, the difference between torture and crimes against humanity and genocide and all of that? So after that year and some change of all of that and a lot of self-reflection and seeing a lot of what people who did that work for decades, what they looked like. I mean, I've never done more drugs and drank than when I worked at the United Nations. Great book, Drugs, Sex,
Wow.
and yes, unscripted. There it is. Drugs, Sex, and United Nations is a phenomenal book. And you have to numb out. You cannot do genocide. And we only work for 3-4 hours a day. Like anyone who thinks United Nations should be abolished, like, I mean, you couldn't. Like, so we all walked in at 10, 11 a.m. We worked till we could, and then we went to the bar and we numbed out and started the day over again. And so after 6-7 months of seeing myself go down that path and looking at what veterans looked like, a mess and like shells of human beings, I left and I came back to Philadelphia and had some soul searching then before Giampolo Law Group and Philly Gay Lawyer emerged. But basically the carryover was the human rights issue of the United States, especially being Canadian, the human rights issue of the United States at that time. That, I mean, there are many human rights issues going on, civil rights, I call them human rights issues going on in the United States. But the one that I obviously, as a lesbian, felt most aligned and passionate about was LGBTQ rights and being Canadian and seeing how different it was. I mean, you could throw a rock and hit Montreal from Philly ultimately, and yet it's night and day. So then Giampolo Law Group was born.
Well, Giampolo Law Group considers other areas of law beyond international law. One of your areas that you focus on is adoption. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about your reaction to the US Supreme Court's decision in the Catholic Social Services case that was just handed down in Philly. How is that going to impact your clients as they move forward?
So I have an interesting take on Fulton v. Philadelphia on several levels. So first and foremost, I do believe in the First Amendment. I do believe in the right, religious affiliation and whatnot. So what has never been litigated yet, still, in my opinion, Fulton, for everyone listening, Fulton has a very, very, very narrow holding. A lot of jurisprudential legal analysts don't believe that the holding in Fulton can actually be used for anything else because the facts were so specific and the holding related to the facts so specifically that other than the social, issues with it, that it's a very narrow holding, which is good for the LGBTQ community, A. B, the Supreme Court has decided even more influential or more impactful religious, what we call religious discrimination cases on their shadow docket. The shadow docket is the docket where they don't have to write an opinion, where they can do it in 2-3 days. And like, so leading up to Fulton, there were actually more monumental in terms of impact. Like Fulton was a narrow holding, but there were more sort of Hobby Lobby, like religious impactful cases that were decided on the shadow docket. And while it looks like the Supreme Court punted all year, they were actually doing so much in their shadow docket that, and I'm working on an article on that, but it's almost like a law review article. It's not like a typical article that I would write. It's just more than that. So where does Rick Santorum's First Amendment right begin and end? And where does our Fifth and 14th right amendment begin and end? And that has never been litigated. However, so, and they deserve, to be able, if they're not taking taxpayer dollars, they get to do whatever they want. And that's where the line is for the city of Philadelphia, I believe, because I helped pay for that. If I wanted to foster, my taxpayer dollars went to you, and now I want to be a foster parent and you won't allow me to be a foster parent. So that's where I disagree, is you can't use my tax dollars to then say that you won't then allow me to be a foster parent.
So if the city of Philadelphia just changed the contract that they had with Catholic Social Services, wouldn't they fulfill their requirements under the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I mean, the city of Philadelphia has been actually very pioneering with changing their vendor contract, their subcontracts. So yes, if they change that, then they would comply with what SCOTUS, said ultimately. But I'm looking at this as more the wedding cake and the wedding dress cases, because really in commerce, right? Like being able to go into a hardware store. This happened down in Tennessee. It said no gays allowed in this guy's hardware store right around the baker's cake case.
Yeah,
exactly. And so it wasn't just in Tennessee, but Alabama, but there were people taking pictures of signs and then putting them side by side, like no colors allowed, and black and white photos pictured next to, no gays allowed, no fags allowed, whatever. And that is the next foray of litigation that is yet to ensue, that the Supreme Court is punting. In my opinion, they're doing little things in the shadow docket, but they're not quite ready for the scrutiny of the entire United States of America to really say, yes, you can have a store. Because I mean, just that slippery slope, right? That slippery slope. Like I don't, appear however one in Tennessee would think a dyke looks like. Right. So if I walk in with my heels and my briefcase and I walk in, like, so they're going to serve me, but they did so accidentally because their sign said, right. So the slippery slope that we get into in commerce, it hasn't been litigated yet. And I don't think the Supreme Court, I know the Supreme Court knows the United States is not ready at this moment in time to deal with that kind of social upheaval of dealing with that issue. So
do you think part of the reason for that has everything to do with the three appointees that Donald Trump picked, named Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and the justice I'm trying to think of?
Yes. So, and Chief Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh. So Amy Coney Barrett, in my opinion, is like the nail in the coffin, right? Out of all of those. And I mean, we can get into packing the court and all of that and ways around it. But yes, 100%, if you look back, especially at Amy Coney Barrett's record and now the shadow docket of 2021 and what all has ensued during the term, she has done some interesting good things. Like with Fulton, she said, she's quoted as I need more information before I'm willing to, go with the majority on this. We need more information on XYZ before, like, what is the replacement? So she had some, like, because she's a textualist, right? So in terms of thinking the way that she's thinking, she's holding strong to her jurisprudential way of thinking, despite her alleged very radical religious beliefs, right? So again, we look at it jurisprudentially. So as like a scientist of the law, she is seemingly continuing to follow her way of legal jurisprudential thinking, even though what we allegedly know about her religious beliefs would take her this way. But she's the one who I fear most, honestly, long term. Kavanaugh, I fear. Gorsuch, I don't actually. But yeah, it goes Amy Coney Barrett, like, whoa. Gorsuch, is like sort of a surprise. And then Kavanaugh is just sort of the, guy that we saw during the hearings, like just a crazy person.
Well put. I don't think I could have put that any other way. He at the hearings just had total meltdowns. He did not look very Supreme Court-esque.
Exactly. Yep.
Now that is the judicial side of the law, but there's another side of the law, which is the legislative side. Are there any thoughts bubbling up in your mind that you might potentially run for office?
I always thought I would. I can't cancel it out for the future. But right now, anyways, we all have impact in different ways. You have your impact leading the state organization at the forefront of all of these issues, right? And yet you're a multifaceted human and you do other things and you have other, likes and whatnot. And so, for me right now, and it's all about, I'm huge, my tagline to my law firm is driven, focused, passionate. So I only do things if all three of those things are aligned. If I'm going to be driven to do it, if I'm going to be focused to do it, and then if I'll be passionate doing it. But right now I see the work that I'm doing on the private side, actually helping the humans, right? Like, getting those adoptions done. I just, one Saturday a month, we do all our will signings. So it was this past Saturday. So I had 9 different will signings, from older, like 75-year-old single lesbians to a young 27-year-old gay couple doing a prenup, to, couples who've been together 47 years, finally getting their wills that are like, oh, we're adults now, but they're like 70, and it's like, I'm seeing the impact that I have on actual humans that feel so seen, acknowledged, and heard by being able to safely come to a gay lawyer's office. I have, when in my intake form, when it asks how you identify, there's a drop down of 9 identifications, from two-spirited to this to that. Like, no one gets that anywhere else. And if I go away from this part of private practice, that goes away. And so I'll announce it here first. You want an announcement?
Thank you.
So I'm in the midst of expanding my law firm nationwide. And so I will have the first ever nationwide law firm geared towards the LGBTQ community. I'm getting licensed in Arizona. I'm bringing on someone down in Florida, waving into New York, DC, Maryland. So by mid 2022, maybe March or April of 2022, Giampolo Law Group will literally, from the East Coast to the West Coast to down to Florida, we'll have the very first law firm geared solely towards the LGBTQ community.
That is a massive announcement.
Yes, I just have chills. That is my work first. Is there are people in Alabama, we are lucky on the coasts. We are lucky on the coast. We are in a haven within a hell. We have no idea what it's like to be in Alabama. We have no idea what it's like to be in these middle American states, and people in Philadelphia. If people in Philadelphia were scared when Trump got elected, what do you think someone in Mississippi felt, right? But people in Philadelphia had me to text and go on Facebook and send me messages. And I mean, my wife's a therapist, and we were so busy. I mean, from the minute Trump was elected through inauguration and then beyond, like we couldn't even attend marches because we were exhausted. We were marching in our offices while other people were marching outside. It was like, but yeah, that is my 3 to 5, maybe 10-year plan of work that is yet to be done, is to lay that nationwide, and for everyone in this country to have access to someone like me in Philadelphia, but make that nationwide. And then after that,
who knows?
Exactly.
So the Pennsylvania Equality Project has a couple of broad ideas that we've announced. The first is we're interested in opening a community resource and safe space shelter in Meadville, Pennsylvania, right here in the heart of Red Country, without a doubt. We don't have any community resource centers up here, and we don't have any LGBTQ specific places where at-risk youth and at-risk, no longer minors, but younger people can turn in the event that they get kicked out of their home in the middle of the night. They are in a domestic violence situation. We want to give them a safe haven until they can get back on better footing.
So housing.
Exactly.
Wow. Overnight.
Yes.
Good for you. Good for you.
And it will be staffed completely by volunteers, except for our social workers. That's our goal.
That is amazing.
So
that's underway. That's underway right now.
We are in the midst of a capital fundraising campaign to that end.
Send me the link.
I will. I will.
Yeah.
And please feel free to share it.
Yes. Right.
So we also are working on something I think is interesting, and that is a project in which we're interviewing same-sex married couples here on the program. And what we're going to do is use these interviews as behind the scenes takes that we can look at and say, okay, this couple, and that couple, we're going to go interview them in person, and then we're going to take all this film footage and put it together as a documentary about marriage equality as it grew here in Pennsylvania. We've got a call into Vermont Governor Howard Dean down in Washington, and I've reached out to Barack and Michelle Obama. So whether they respond or not, I don't know, but if you
I can definitely help you with Edie Windsor's new wife. So Edie Windsor and I became really good friends before she passed, and she married late in life, right? So not Thea, obviously, but the new wife was at a lot of the Philadelphia events that we had and whatnot. So I can definitely put you in touch with her. I can put you in touch with Roberta Kaplan, her lawyer at the time.
Okay.
Would be an interesting, obviously, person to interview.
Absolutely.
Jim Obergeville, but and who else would be good? And then obviously in terms of just married couples, I have hundreds, and I very unique ones. So like a couple stand out that would be documentary worthy in terms of very Edie and Thea like.
Right.
So I can help you just on content side, but in terms of getting the word out. And then there's a PR person who really helped make the Windsor case the PR case that it was, because it was ultimately a tax case, right? It was just based on the tax code, but they needed Edie, to be the face of it. And so her PR person is a lesbian who runs an LGBT solely focused PR firm, and they may be willing to, send out press releases pro bono, do something like, some sort of, and then also locally, my radio show that I have, or now it's a podcast post-COVID, but on iHeartRadio, would definitely be willing to do PSAs for it to get the word out that way. But first and foremost, let's get like the heavy hitters involved.
Absolutely.
And then go from there. Yeah.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because We have gone about and gotten some married couples already just through the Facebook groups that I belong to and that the organization belongs to. We've just posted a broad, if you're married, DM me and we'll get you on.
Right.
Now, we have another big project that we want to do in October of 2022, and that is we want to put on a virtual conference, because we don't know if COVID will be gone yet, but a virtual conference for educators and social workers that will provide them insight into the LGBTQ plus community and how they can interact with students, how they can build GSAs in their schools, how they can reduce the amount of bullying that they find within schools. And we'd like to have this prepared by October of 2022. So we have a lot on our plate, as much as you do.
Yeah, so the one other, two other pieces that I have on my plate by, I'd say, June of 2022. My nonprofit, the Caravan of Hope, is, I created it when Trump got elected, and it's basically exactly what you can imagine, a caravan that goes to Bumble F places where people may not have access, like you said, Meadville, places that wouldn't have access necessarily to an out gay lawyer, where they can just, nonchalantly walk in and have their legal needs met. So I will be doing a cross-country tour in the Caravan of Hope. The tagline is RV there yet? That is hilarious.
Right.
So it'll be cross country, and I would love to stop in your hometown and really, Red America right here in Pennsylvania. But so we'll build that into the itinerary. So I'm thinking that will be June of 2022 for Gay Pride, and just pop in, and basically true legal services will be done. Transgender name changes, adoptions, wills, uncontested divorces, anything that can be done transactionally on paper without having to walk into a courtroom, we will do for people. And once we figure out the itinerary, we'll blast it out, and the whole country. And that goes hand in hand with announcing the nationwide law firm, because so that will go hand in hand. But and I forget what the other, and at your virtual summit, we're doing a virtual summit, and it's going to be geared towards lawyers, and exactly the way that you want to focus on your people, the social workers, the teachers, how they can serve the youth better and serve teachers better. I will be teaching lawyers on how to serve the LGBTQ community better. And a whole virtual summit would basically be an LGBTQ legal virtual summit, CLEs, clear across the board. First one ever done, geared towards teaching lawyers how to serve the LGBTQ better, and add it as a practice area the way that my whole firm is.
Well, there is one other question I have before our 30 minutes hit, and that is this. Your resume mentions having a chief bark officer. Does he tag along? Hi, Nico. Nico. Oh, you are adorable.
Yeah. And there he is on cue.
How old is Nico?
They think 10. They think 10. Yeah, he's a rescue. So I only adopt seniors. Well, he was actually a teenager when I got him, but I've had him 4 years. So wow. Yes. And you have one too? I didn't know.
Well, actually, we have 3. We have a Chihuahua Terrier mix, and I don't know what Precious is.
She's Precious. That's all she needs to be.
Exactly. And then we have Stella. Now, Stella is a Cavachon, a mix of the King Charles Cavalier Spaniel and the Bichon Frise.
Yep.
One dog, and she gets really thick matted hair this time of year. So she just got groomed, and we're convinced she's not only a kleptomaniac, but a lesbian. And why? You know why? Because she hides in the closet all the time. Seriously, she does.
I love it. Well, he makes working from home just doable,
Yes, he does.
Yeah, that's a chief bark officer. Anyone who comes to my office will get barked at. That is a given, but it's all from love. So, and people think it's so cute. I had a meeting yesterday, and the woman was like, "Where's Nico?" And I'm like, "How about your lawyers here?" Like, I was like, I'm just, They could give me, take me or leave me, but Nico, however.
Right. Oh yeah, you got to have Nico.
Exactly.
Oh, that is adorable. Well, Angela, our time is running.
This was amazing. This is
Yeah,
great.
I appreciate it very much. I'm sure there's footage from our discussion today that will get embedded into the film. And even if it doesn't, we will definitely be popping into your office. We'll plan that all out.
Yep.
But we'd like to stop by and get some live footage where we talk face to face rather than virtually.
Sure. Absolutely. We'll do one of my will signing days and you can speak to all of the clients that are coming together on that day. Yeah, that would be a rich day.
Well, we
Totally.
make it kind of like a Michael Moore film. So
Right. By
the whole
David
thing
Moore.
done in his style.
Exactly.
And as luck has it, my brother is Michael. He's a chemist out in Ohio.
Not Breaking Bad style though, right? Just
No.
Okay.
No, actually, he breaks stuff in the lab. So yeah, I watched the whole series. But Mike, no, he works for a company called Freudenberg, and they make parts and adhesives that go off to NASA, assuming NASA still exists.
They tell us it does. Who knows?
Right. Well, thank you very much, Angela, for being on our show.
Absolutely.
Orders. We want to let you know we'll be here next Sunday at 1:00 for another episode of Pep Talks Uncut. Take care and bye-bye.